My name's Josh Sassinger. I'm the Product Support Manager for Indeco North America. I'm here today to go through the disassembly, cleaning, inspection, and reassembly of the hammer assembly found in the PD10R. We're going to remove the inflation screw, but we are not going to install the Indeco charge kit for two reasons. The first one is when you remove the inflation screw, the sealing washer is no longer good and will need to be discarded. The second reason is because we do not want to backfill the regulator and hose with oil if the diaphragm has failed and there is oil on the nitrogen side of the diaphragm. We're going to loosen the inflation screw, position 44, and we're going to check for nitrogen. We're going to let the nitrogen bleed completely off and then remove the screw and sealing washer. We will be discarding the sealing washer. In the next step, we're going to remove the accumulator to disassemble and check the diaphragm. We're going to be removing the 8 accumulator bolts, position 47, with a 17mm Allen socket by hand. Remove the accumulator bolt, inspect the threads for damage. If there is no damage, set the bolt aside for reuse. We've removed the accumulator. We're going to set it off to the side to be rebuilt. We're going to remove the rubber stop and side rod lock to access the side rod. We're just going to pry them out. Oftentimes the lock will be doing its job and be locked up against the head. You'll need to loosen the side rod in order to free up the lock for removal. Using a 3/4 inch breaker bar, 30mm socket, we're going to be removing the side rod, position 27. We're going to be removing and loosening the bolts in the cross loosening position. We're going to remove the steel diaphragm, position 26. Inspect for any damage. We're going to remove the front 2 side rods from the head, leaving the back 2 side rods in place. We are going to keep the same nut with the same rod and put off to the side for reuse. Inspect the rod for cracks, for damage to the rubber, and for damage in the threads. If any of these parts are damaged, replace the rod. We are going to leave the rear tie bolts in place in order to balance the head as we press the head off of the inner components. We've installed the head removal tool using removed accumulator bolts. We're going to press the head off of the inner components. Now that we have the head removed, we can set it over on the workbench for inspection and cleaning. We're going to remove the box body cover, distributor box body with the distributor, the guide adapter, in order for us to expose the piston. I'm removing the box body and distributor together so that way the distributor doesn't fall out. The distributor is a sensitive item in the hammer and we do not want to damage it. We're going to be removing the guide adapter. It's possible you will encounter oil suction when removing the guide adapter, so tools will be necessary for removal. Remove the centering pin and we're going to set aside for reuse. We're going to remove the check valves, inspect for any damage, and set aside for reuse. Using the appropriate lifting device, remove the piston from the cylinder. Now that we've removed the piston, we will inspect it and set it off to the side for reuse. When the piston comes out, you're going to see a ring right around here. It's called oil erosion. It's not detrimental to the piston. You don't have to scrap the piston for it or anything. Just some light lapping or light sanding with emery cloth is fine. All you're trying to do is remove the high spots, any sharp edges that can cause it to grab inside the cylinder. Same thing with up here. You're going to see some scoring in this area, and it's normal. We just want to clean up any of the high spots. Just sand off the high spots, the sharp edges, to avoid anything from hanging up as parts interact with each other. If you get out of center, this thing could recoil at kind of an angle, and that's where you get some contact, and that's where you'll see some scoring in these areas. But what you don't need to do is get over aggressive with the cleanup. What we're looking for is damage in this sealing area right here. So if there's any damage, cracking, rust, things of that nature that are causing imperfections in this area, this would deem the piston to be not reusable. Also, it's important to note that these pistons are finished this way on purpose. This is after the hardening process. These pistons are not chromed. You cannot chrome a piston. As it makes contact with the tool, the piston kind of flexes a little bit. And if it's chromed, the chrome will flake off and enter into the hydraulic system. So this is the finished product right here that you want to keep. Using 2 previously removed accumulator bolts, install them into the cylinder, and we're going to lift the cylinder off of the chuck housing. Being mindful we have an alignment pin, try to catch it before it falls down. Set it off to the side. I'm going to remove the upper spacer. Remove the greasing pin. We're removing the O-ring from the grease pin area of the upper spacer. And then we are going to remove the O-ring from the grease pin area of the cylinder. Next, we will remove the O-ring from the cylinder. Remove the dirt seal. Removing the oil seal. Inspecting the cylinder consists of inspecting the oil grooves all the way through from top to bottom. When what we're looking for is damage or folded over oil grooves, and if you find them, they'll need to be repaired as the cylinders are very, very rarely replaced. So what we do is we use a Dremel tool or a equivalent pencil grinder with a very thin cutoff wheel, and we insert the cutoff tool into the groove and open the groove back up all the way around. Now we're not making the groove deeper, we're just opening the groove back up. And we're only going to open the grooves up that need to be opened. Once we've got all of the grooves opened back up, we will take a ball hone and insert the ball hone into the cylinder, lubricated with some cutting oil or equivalent, and we're only going to polish the cylinder briefly to remove any high spots from the cylinder wall. And then what you're going to do is inspect with a pick. You're going to go through every single groove to make sure the groove is clear of any obstruction or sharp edge. Once you've verified that all of the grooves are clear, the next step is very important. You must clean the cylinder thoroughly with brake cleaner, parts washer, whatever you use to clean the cylinder, but it must be cleaned thoroughly. And then you must wrap your pick in a towel and go through every single groove, cleaning out any extra grinding dust, metal, or material in the cylinder, and then clean it again. And you repeat that process until every single groove is clean. Once all the grooves are clean, the cylinder is ready to be reused. We're going to inspect the distributor, distributor box body, and guide adapter. For the distributor, we're looking for any damage on the outside surface in here, any damage around the surface here, and any damage we find can be repaired by minor sanding, light grinding. You may find minor scoring in the inside. This is acceptable. For the box body and guide adapter, the inspection is the same. We're going to check the oil grooves to make sure there's no damage. Oil grooves and the guide adapter for damage. If there is any damage present or any grooves are folded over, we're going to come back to our cutoff tool and we're going to go in and we're going to open up any of the grooves that are damaged. We're not cutting the grooves deeper, we're just opening the grooves back up. Once we have the affected grooves opened up, we'll come in with the ball hone, minor polishing to remove any high spots or sharp edges. When we are inspecting the upper spacer, in this area right here, we're looking for an egg shape. If this area is egg shaped, this component is worn past its limits and is ready to be replaced. In order to get a good understanding of the wear being seen in the upper spacer, we need to clean the component thoroughly and check for wear. We're looking for even wear in this area right here. If it starts to get too deep this way, or this way, you'll start to see that egg shaping that we were discussing in the previous inspection. And then as that wear gets deeper in there, it's time to replace the component. To remove the circlip, get behind it and pry it out of its position. Remove the lower insert bushing. Note that most of the time this bushing will probably not slide out so easily. If the bushing cannot be removed by hand, it will need to be cut out using the appropriate tools. Next, we're going to remove the plug for the pressure regulating valve. In the field, you will find that this plug can be extremely difficult to remove. An extra long breaker bar or extension handle for your ratchet may be required. As we remove the pressure regulating valve plug, the spring may come with it. If for some reason the spring is left inside, you can use a small pick or pliers to remove it. As you remove the pressure regulating valve plug, pay attention to the orientation of the spacer barrel and shims. Using needle nose pliers, we're going to reach in and grab the spool, noting the orientation of the spool and placing aside. Using a snap-on cotter pin puller, we're going to reach in and grab the barrel and remove the O-ring from the pressure regulating valve barrel. And the final part of the disassembly of the head will be to remove the O-ring from the groove inside the head. Next, we will install the lower steel insert bushing, position 12, and the circlip, position 13. Make sure you check the orientation of the lower bushing and install the grease groove to match the grease groove in the insert holder. No freezing or extra pressing is necessary. Slide the insert bushing into the insert holder and then install the circlip. Next, we will be installing the upper spacer into the chuck housing. Keeping in mind orientation of the grease passage in line with the front of the hammer for the cylinder to be installed correctly. Install a new O-ring into the grease passage of the upper spacer and install the grease pin into the passage of the upper spacer. The second O-ring will be installed into the bottom of the cylinder. Next, we'll be installing the piston seals, making sure we note the orientation of the V-groove for the oil seal to be installed facing up, and for the dirt seal, the V-groove facing down. Here is the second O-ring for the greasing pin being installed into the lower portion of the cylinder. Install the O-ring on the upper groove of the cylinder. With a small amount of STP oil treatment or hydraulic oil, lubricate the seals. And now we will install the cylinder on the chuck housing. Next, we'll be installing the cylinder onto the chuck housing, making sure we align the alignment pin with the cylinder and the chuck housing. Apply fresh hydraulic oil into the cylinder. Lubricate the piston with clean hydraulic oil. Now we'll insert the piston into the cylinder. Remove the lifting device. Install the alignment pin into the cylinder. Lubricate the check valves with hydraulic oil. Install the check valves into the appropriate hole with the seat side down. Install the guide adapter on top of the cylinder, noting the position of the alignment pin. Next, we'll install the box body with the distributor installed inside of it on top of the guide adapter and cylinder, noting the location of the alignment pin hole. Ensure that the distributor moves freely upon installation. Next, install the box body cover. Align the holes, and that's as good as it gets. Install the O-ring into the O-ring groove in the head. Lightly lubricate the O-ring on the pressure regulating valve barrel. Install the barrel into the back head. Using the plug, we're going to press and seat the barrel into place. Then remove the plug. You're also going to want to lubricate the spool and install it up inside the barrel. After installing a new O-ring on the plug, assemble the spacer barrel and shims and reinstall back into the plug. Next, insert the spring into the plug, and now it is ready to install in the head. Install the plug into the head using the 30mm socket. Seat the plug and tighten to 365 foot-pounds. Apply the STP oil treatment to the rubber shock absorbers of the side rods, and then lubricate with the thread grease on the threads and on the flange of the bolt head. And then install the 2 side rods into the back of the head to prepare installation of the head. Keeping the same nut with the same rod, place the nut into the nut pocket of the chuck housing. Apply STP oil treatment to the upper section of the hammer. Lubricate the upper parts inside the head for ease of installation. If STP oil treatment is not available, regular hydraulic oil will do. Lower the head down onto the components. At this point, the head is resting on the O-ring, and it is okay to remove the lifting strap. Next, we will persuade the head past the O-ring. Place the front 2 nuts into the chuck housing pockets. Repeat the lubricating process for the rubber, threads, and bolt flange, and install the tie rods. Tighten the side rods down hand tight. We're going to torque the side rods to 100 foot-pounds initially. Now we will perform the final torques in the cross-tightening fashion to 180 degrees, plus 15 degrees, and then minus 15 degrees. I'm going to mark the head of the bolt and the hammer to outline the torque procedure in the 60-degree increments required. Next, we will be installing the side rod locks and the rubber stops. If for some reason the lock will not go on smoothly, as this one is not, we will turn the rod counterclockwise in this particular case to align the side rod to install the lock. Next, we will install the steel diaphragm. In disassembling the accumulator, we're first going to remove the O-ring and discard. And then we are going to remove the shell bolts. We're going to separate the 2 halves and remove the diaphragm. Discard the diaphragm. Clean the 2 halves of the accumulator. Using a new diaphragm, we're going to reassemble the accumulator. Using rags and compressed air, thoroughly clean both halves of the accumulator. No chemicals, no liquids, no oils in the nitrogen side, and clean and free of debris on the diaphragm side. Insert the diaphragm into the lower shell. Make sure it's in the groove. Install the upper shell and align the holes to insert the screws. Lightly lubricate the threads of the shell fixing screw, position 46, and insert from the bottom into the shell halves. Insert it as far as you can go with your fingers. Rotate the accumulator shell 180 degrees. Lightly lubricate the threads of the next bolt and insert the screw into the accumulator. Using the 14mm Allen socket, we're going to snug the 2 bolts previously inserted. We're going to flip the accumulator assembly over, insert the rest of the shell fixing screws, and torque them to 145 foot-pounds in the cross tightening sequence. Using the PD10 accumulator charge kit, install a new sealing washer, position 45, underneath the inflation screw 44. Regulator and hoses need to be acquired separately. Close off the charge adapter, release the excess nitrogen from the line, remove the line from the charge adapter, and remove the charge adapter. Once the charge adapter is removed, we can torque the inflation screw to 36 foot-pounds. Next, we'll be testing for leakage on the inflation screw by pouring oil over the inflation screw and checking for bubbles. In the beginning, you'll have bubbles as it pushes the air out. We're going to let it set for 5 minutes and reassess. If there are bubbles present, we will tighten the inflation screw more until the bubbles quit coming out. Install the new O-ring into the bottom of the accumulator, flip it over and install it onto the head. Lubricate the threads and neck of the accumulator bolts and install the accumulator bolts to bolt the accumulator to the head. Finally, we're going to torque the accumulator bolts to 230 foot-pounds. After finishing tightening the last accumulator bolt, the hammer is ready to be put back in service. Thank you for watching this video today. Hopefully we've covered all the topics necessary for you to repair the Indeco hammer found in the PD10R. For more questions, please contact your Vermeer Service Center.